A very good morning to all of you. Welcome to Ansarkari. So let's start with today's analysis video for 26th of April 2023. So here we see that amidst the ceasefire, first set of Indians, they leave the war battered Sudan. So this operation is named as Operation Kaveri, and they have been like on board INS Sumheda from the Port Sudan. So the location of Port Sudan is important. Please spot that on the atlas. Apart from that, the name of this operation is important from the examination perspective. Apart from this, so Supreme Court is going to hear the wrestlers which are protesting their plea against the BJP MP, and he is also the president of the Wrestling Federation of India. So Supreme Court said that the sexual harassment allegations which have been raised by 7 women wrestlers against the Wrestling Federation of India's president, and he's also BJP MP, they were serious. So according to Supreme Court, the allegations, they are serious. And apart from this, a bench led by the Chief Justice of India listed for Friday the petitions filed by the grapplers regarding the non-registration of FIR. So that would be heard on Friday. So the court has also issued formal notice and allowed petitioners liberty to serve the copies of the petition to the council for the Delhi government as well. So Punjab's ex-chief minister Prakash Singh Badal, he passes away. So that's the thing. And so the MCD, it is going to elect its next mayor again. And here, when this topic was in news before, we had like already discussed the important things regarding the committee and the members and what is the procedure followed. And then regarding the Supreme Court judgment also, because this matter was obviously taken to Supreme Court as well, and it says that nominated members would not be having the right to vote when it comes to the appointment of mayor. Prime Minister says that only a strong center can harness the power of states. Prime Minister, he flags off the Vande Bharat Express train, announces several railway development projects, and launches the Kochi Water Metro on second day of his visit to Kerala. So he said that only a strong government at the center could harness the power of the states to spur the national development. So it is not just a unitary government, but he's saying that a strong center, it does not mean that concentration of power in the central government, but a strong center in the sense it can be like having single party having the majority. So that plays an important role when it comes to even strong center and state relations and strong federalism in a democracy. So science enthusiasts, they gathered to observe the zero shadow day at Jawaharlal Nehru Planetarium in Bengaluru during the rare celestial phenomenon which occurred at around 12:17 p.m., where the sun was directly overhead and the shadow of the vertical objects disappeared for a brief period of time. So that is the zero shadow day, when sun is exactly overhead and then there are no shadows which are created. So High Court, Bombay High Court says that if you are scaring animals using sticks, then that is an act of cruelty. So we are having the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, and this is one judgment which is a part of it. And apart from this, we are also seeing the attacks of stray dogs, and because of which we are also seeing the rise in the cases of cruelty towards animals. Coming to the editorial page, so here, when it comes to the Sudan evacuation highlights, so it is highlighting the challenges which India faces in the conflict. So this Operation Kaveri, it is launched to evacuate the Indians which are struck inside the war-torn Sudan that is underway. The government is making the most of 72-hour ceasefire window to bring out about 3,000 civilians. So the operation, it involves the Indian Air Force, the Indian Navy, and it is being coordinated by the Ministry of External Affairs. So given the heavy fighting in the Khartoum, so Khartoum is the capital of Sudan, and fighting between the forces which are loyal to the head of the ruling council, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who also heads the Sudanese armed forces, and his former deputy general Mohammed Hemeti Daglo he's from the paramilitary group. So most civilians, they are being brought by road to Port Sudan, and that's a perilous journey to be evacuated by air and sea. So India has been coordinating efforts even with resources in Sudan, including US, UK, UAE, Saudi Arabia, regarding the logistics, timing of the evacuation operations, and even using Saudi and French planes. So en route to the Caribbean for a scheduled visit, the External Affairs Minister also met the UN Secretary General in New York to seek help, and it's clear that the military personnel, officials, and diplomats will have a difficult few days ahead, given that even humanitarian workers and ambulances, they have been attacked. So that's the situation, and they have no doubt been assisted by the cumulative experience of similar operations over the decades, beginning with the largest since the civilian evacuation during the Gulf War in 1991. So Sudan evacuation brings once more into focus the particular challenges that India faces in any conflict. And with about 14 million non-resident Indians, more than 7 million tourists and travelers each year, there's particularly no conflict zone. There is no conflict today that does not affect an Indian citizen. So given that many work in the most dangerous environments, examples being students in Ukraine or nurses in Iraq or Yemen or laborers in Libya, Syria, Lebanon, the responsibility of the government to help those without the means to return to safety, that becomes very greater, specifically in such conflicts, and as a result, a standard operating procedure and even possibly a special force to deal with such crisis, which has been recommended even by the Parliamentary Standing Committee for the External Affairs in 2022, must be considered by the government. So because ऐसी situation में ऐसी conflicts में India को again we need to face a lot of challenges. So it was like recommended by the Parliamentary Standing Committee previous year that a proper standard operating procedure होना चाहिए to deal with such situations, and also having a special force to deal with such crises. So it's also essential that such crises they be devoid of the political grandstanding or finger pointing and that unseemingly public spats over the evacuation. So obviously politics need not get into all these types of matters. So India is admired for its reputation and ability to harness all its resources in rescuing every single citizen in any corner of the world every time they are in need. So that reputation must remain intact. So the right to litigate use of the legal remedies to limit the nature's exploitation is at the core of democracy. So CBI seems to have been overzealous in registering a case against the environmental lawyer Ritvik Datta and his organization Legal Initiative for Forest and Environment for violating the Forest Contribution Regulation Act provision. So the gist of the allegations is they're using the foreign funds to encourage litigation that will stall the existing and prospective coal-fired plants in India. So that's the allegation. And while the sourcing the foreign funds and use is certainly something to keep an eye on, any criminalizing of the act of opposition to the coal plants when pursued by legal means is an absurd stance for a government to adopt. So as a signatory, India is a signatory to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and various key agreements as well. India has undertaken to gradually reduce its reliance on the fossil fuel sources and to be net zero or source almost all power from the non-fossil fuel sources by 2070. So India has also consistently endorsed the reports by the IPCCs that speaks of the urgency of ensuring global temperatures they do not exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius of pre-industrial times. So, however, under the principles of common and differentiated responsibility, India has maintained its right to rely on the coal plants in the interim as it is still a developing economy. So, obviously, coal plants they are still an important part of the economy, and because India is still a developing country, so however, like we are gradually ensuring ki they are like phased out, but that will only happen gradually. So the true cost of the renewable sources remains much more than that of the fossil fuel power. So there are obviously certain challenges even from the renewable energy sector because they're still very costly compared to the fossil fuel power. So the industrialized West, which while slowing its fossil fuel consumption, they continue to be reliant on the natural gas and keeps falling short on its commitments to transfer the technology and finance to the developing countries to accelerate their clean energy adaptation. So basically, जो developed world है वहाँ पे they are trying कि जो उनकी fossil fuel पर dependence है वो कम हो and they rely more on natural gas. But at the same time, they also have the responsibility to, you know, when it comes to technology transfer and providing climate finance to the developing countries. So they fail on that. And उसकी वजह से obviously जो developing countries में climate change से related targets है वहाँ पे they face the challenges and thus coal is a necessary evil but still evil and seeing it any other way belies the scientific evidence. So India, it has like 28.5 gigawatts of coal power capacity planned and 32 gigawatts of plants they are under construction also. So ऐसा नहीं है कि जो current plants है सिर्फ हम उनके ऊपर depend होने वाले हैं और new coal plants भी setup किए जाएंगे. So commissioning of many has been delayed due to insufficient environment clearances, land acquisition and redevelopment and rehabilitation related problems. So ये कुछ common challenges हैं and these however follow from the rulings by the NGT or from a lack of adherence to the norms prescribed mainly under the provisions of environment protection and the related legislation. So funding for the new coal plants is increasingly difficult for the multilateral funding agencies refusing to fund such plants. So जो new coal plants की construction की बात की जा रही है funding से related challenges इसलिए face करने पड़ रहे हैं क्योंकि एक तो आपको बहुत सारी agencies के ऊपर depend होना पड़ता है when it comes to funding. And obviously, since they are coal-based power plants, so all of them do not agree to provide funds for that. So many coal plants, they are running inefficiently and they rely on lenient environmental curbs as they are critical to India's power needs. So using the legal remedies to limit the industrial exploitation of the nature and ensuring just compensation is at the core of a civilized democracy. And efforts at undermining such a fundamental compact body bodes ill for India. So understanding the temperature anomalies, global warming does not mean that each month or each year will be warmer than the previous month or the previous year. So ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. Then the global distribution, the temperature anomalies is due to the land, ocean, atmosphere processes. So it involves land, ocean, and atmosphere processes that dynamically determine the weather and the climate. So there is unstable kind of warming which is happening around the world because of climate change. So here we see that there was news recently that in March 2023, it was the second warmest March on record. So what does this actually mean in terms of the impact on the planet or the local weather or even on the human psyche? So do such headlines they help or are they likely to render people numb to the idea of global warming by normalizing the warming as a part of everyday life? So definitely even it impacts the humans and the National Oceanic and the Atmospheric Administration. It serves as an excellent resource to contextualize the individual months ranking by temperature anomalies. So looking at the reason why this year March was the second warmest month. So March 2023, it was indeed the second warmest in the instrumental records. So warmest March, it occurred just a few years ago in 2016. So जो 2016 में March का time था, that was the warmest on record. जब we saw the biggest El Nino of 21st century, it triggered a mini global warming. But January to March average temperature anomaly ranks 2023 as the fourth warmest such period on record. So this raises some obvious questions. Why was the March the second warmest and it was not the warmest? So like natural climate variability, including events like El Nino, it can temporarily spike the temperatures. And the old adage that says the climate is what we expect and weather is what we get. So in India, we expect March to be the beginning of the scorching summer season, but a particular year's March may be cooler due to some other climate factors like agar La Nina hota hai, and especially जब average करते हैं over a region as large as India or even an Indian state. So इस case में भी कभी temperature fall होता हुआ भी दिखाई देता है. So El Nino year में if warmer water it spreads in a band from west to east over the equatorial Pacific Ocean. So in a La Nina year, cooler water spreads east to west in the same region. So both phenomena they have distinct and significant effects on the global climate. So यहाँ पे concept आ जाता है El Nino La Nina का, and you need to be like clear with that. So why is this context important? So the distribution of temperature deviations from the March this year from the baseline long-term average March temperature, it is visible in the global map of the temperature anomalies. So agar map one ko to try to understand, so it is showing the land and ocean temperature departure from the average March 2023. So in this region, basically you can see temperature was like it is in the range of 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. So the monstrous warming to the west to north of India begins to tell the story of the weather anomalies that rendered a cooler March over Mumbai. Excess pre-monsoon rains were there in the northwest, and scorching heat waves were there in Kerala and Odisha. So here you can see the variation in the temperature anomalies. And Arabian Sea, it was like it is also warmed much more than expected this March, and we must watch carefully this continues so it can favor a stronger monsoon, but may also enhance the cyclogenesis. Cyclogenesis is the birth of the cyclonic circulation over Arabian Sea. So global distribution of the temperature anomalies is due to the land, ocean, and atmosphere process that dynamically determines the weather and climate. So global warming does not mean कि every month, every year temperature सिर्फ increase होता हुआ जाएगा. So instead, a better place to begin would be by averaging the weather over a decade. So decade to decade warming clearly shows that humans, they are now ensuring each decade is warmer than the one before. So अगर आप decade वाले time period पे देखोगे, तब we can say कि each decade is getting warmer, और इसको हम shorter time frame के लिए नहीं देख सकते हैं. So even like हमने ऐसे बहुत सारे instances देखे कि यूरोप में there was heat wave like conditions, so उसकी वजह से there were deaths as well. So all these are temperature anomalies, and that's the important thing. So Genome India project के बारे में अगर we try to understand some important things. So why is this project important for us? And what is the significance of genome sequencing? So the Department of Biotechnology recently said that the exercise to sequence around 10,000 Indian human genomes and create a database. And the center-backed Genome India project is about 2/3 complete. And 7,000 in genomes have already been sequenced, of which 3,000 are available for public access to researchers also. So genome sequencing hota kya hai? Genome sequence, like human genome hota hai, it is the entire set of DNA. DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid, which is residing in the nucleus of every cell of the human body. So human body में जो cell है उसके nucleus में, हर cell के nucleus में we get this DNA, which is the human genome. So it carries the complete genetic information responsible for the development and functioning of an organism. So DNA, it consists of the double-stranded molecule built up by 4 bases. And while the sequence of base pair, it is identical in all the humans, there are differences in the genome of every human being that makes them unique. So her human being ka DNA different hai, and that's how they are unique. So the process of deciphering the order of the base pairs to decode the genetic fingerprint of the human, that is called genome sequencing. So हर ह्यूमन बीइंग के डीएनए का जो बेस पेयर्स को व्हेन यू डिसाइफर सो वो हर एक का डिफरेंट होता है एवरी ह्यूमन हैज अ यूनिक जीनोम सो उसकी बेसिकली उस प्रोसेस को भी बोलते हैं जीनोम सीक्वेंसिंग एंड इसके अलावा what are the applications of genome sequencing तो हम इसको कहाँ use कर सकते हैं so it has been used to evaluate the rare disorders preconditions for disorders and even cancer from the viewpoint of the genetics so here in medical field it has applications so rather than as diseases of certain organs so nearly 10,000 diseases are they are known to be the result of a single gene malfunctioning so in public health however sequencing it has been used to read the code of viruses one of the first practical usages it was in 2014 jab MIT and Harvard they sequenced the samples of the Ebola virus from infected African patients to show how genomic data of viruses it could reveal the hidden pathways of transmission. So even in such cases also genome sequencing becomes important. So even during COVID-19 pandemic, how did the genome sequencing helped us? So January 2020, when we saw the COVID-19 pandemic was just beginning, Chinese scientists, they sequenced the genome of a novel pathogen causing infections in the city of Wuhan. So then they shared it with his virologist friend in Australia who published the genomic code online. And it was after this that the virologists they began evaluating the sequence to try and understand to how to combat this virus, track the mutating virus also, and their intensity and spread and to come up with a vaccine. So to enable an effective response against COVID-19, researchers they kept a track of the emerging variants and because obviously आज के time में भी जो अभी currently cases increase हो रहे COVID-19 के they are because of mutations. So to have a track of all those mutations, it is genome sequencing through which we get to know about them. And genome sequencing, it became one of the first steps in this important process. So here the purpose of the genome sequencing was to understand the role of certain mutations in increasing virus infectivity. So India also put in place a sequencing framework. The Indian SARS-CoV-2 Genomics Consortia was formed. So this consortium of labs across the country was tasked with scanning coronavirus samples from patients and flagging the presence of variants known to have spiked the transmission internationally. So even to know about कि किस कौन सा virus spread हो रहा है, so for that genome sequencing is important, and through it we can get to know about the variant which is causing much more infections. So what is this Genome India project? So India's 1.3 billion strong population consists of over 4,600 population groups, many of which are endogamous. Thus, Indian population harbors distinct variations with disease-causing mutations often amplified within some of these groups. So there are around 4,600 population groups in India, so often amplified with some of these groups. So even in disease like agar because of like one variation because वहाँ पे for India में we have 4,600 population groups. So उसमें obviously results would be different. So that's why the Genome India project is important. And we still lack a comprehensive catalog of the genetic variations in India's population. So creating a database of Indian genomes, it will allow the researchers to learn about the genetic variants which are found in India's population groups and use them to customize even drugs. So about 20 institutions across India, they are involved in this genome sequencing project in India. So on the code on social security for the platform-based gig workers, so gig economy, this is an important topic. So talking about the code on social security of the gig workers. So the labor code that was passed in 2020, it acknowledges the gig workers as new occupational category in the making in a bid to keep India's workforce secure as it embraces new kinds of work. But the question is whether these codes they have enabled workers to ask for the pay they were promised or not. Because gig economy में होता क्या है कि like आप हर टास्क बेसिस पे काम करते हो, आपका एक टास्क कंप्लीट हुआ, यू गेट द पेमेंट. सो यहाँ पे इवन इन टर्म्स ऑफ पेमेंट द मनी विच यू गेट, there are challenges even there and problems are there. So Rajasthan mein, it is the government has recently announced Rajasthan platform based gig workers registration and welfare bill, which has stringent provisions against the errant aggregators as well as the various welfare policies. So we'll be talking about the Union Government's Code on Social Security for the gig workers, which doles out benefits and other rights. So obviously, जब हम Code on Social Security की बात करते हैं, तो it is providing with the benefits and other rights to the gig workers. So we need a proper and separate law even to regulate and organize the gig economy. So the new code on social security, it allows the platform worker to be defined by their vulnerability, not their labor, and not the vulnerabilities of the platform work. So Swiggy workers, they have been essential during pandemic. Even so, they have like faced continuous dip in the pay, and there has been no rewards for being essential workers for them. So during the last 6 months, many platform workers, they have unionized under the All India Gig Workers Union. So they have formed their union and they have protested day in and day out, deploring Swiggy for reducing their base pay from 35 rupees to rupees 10 per delivery order. And recently, even in case of Blinkit, abhi strike हुई थी by their workers regarding the same reason. And then we also have like Olas and Uber drivers, they are also part of the gig economy. So defining an employee. So Code on Wages 2019, it tries to expand this idea by using wages as the primary definition of who an employee is. So wage relationship, it's an important relationship in the world of work, especially in the context of large informal economy. So the word wage is very important. So even so, the terms gig worker, platform worker, or gig economy appear elsewhere in the code on social security also. But the law, they are perspective, and what is written within them creates the limits to what rights can be demanded and how these rights can be demanded. So the categories and where they appear becomes key signs for understanding what kind of identity different workers can have under these new laws. So the main role of the law for a platform worker is to make available the benefits and safety nets from the government and the platform companies. Even though platforms they are part of the idea of how work will go in the future, so current laws they do not see them as future industrial workers. So कोई guarantee नहीं है when we talk about the gig workers regarding their pay, regarding social security, and other benefits. So the Code on Social Security 2020 platform workers, they're now eligible for benefits like maternity benefits ho gaya, life, disability cover, old age protection, provident fund, employment injury benefits. So they are now entitled to these benefits under this Code on Social Security, but eligibility does not mean कि benefits उनको guaranteed हैं. So none of these, they are secure benefits. ऐसा कोई नहीं है कि for like 100% they would be given these benefits. They are just eligible for them. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है हर एक gig worker को ये benefits available किए जाएंगे. So the central government, it can formulate some welfare schemes that cover these aspects, the personal and the work security, but they are not guaranteed. So actualizing these benefits, it will depend on the political will at the central and the state government levels. So the platform worker identity, it has the potential to grow in power and scope, but it will be mediated by even politicians, electioneers, rates of underemployment, and large and investment heavy technology companies that are notorious for not complying with the local laws. So, but there are no guarantees for their better and more stable days for the platform workers, even though they are meant to be the future of the work. So उनकी जो benefits हैं they are not guaranteed, जो rights है they are not guaranteed, so still they are like very unorganized kind of sector, and for that we need a one comprehensive law which talks about, which guarantees them all their rights which they should get and the benefits. So the rate of out-of-pocket expenditure is declining. So this is what the health ministry has to say. It released the national health accounts estimates for India for 2019-20 and noted कि जो share of out-of-pocket expenditure है in the total health expenditure, it is declining. And earlier it was at 62% in 2014-15. Now it is at 47% in 2019-20. So that's an important data. But we see key health expenditures share in the country's total GDP that has increased from 1.1% to 1.35% only. So जो increase हुआ है in terms of कि कितने percentage of GDP is spent on the healthcare, so वो बहुत ही low level ही है अभी भी. 1.35% the GDP in healthcare, that's a very low level. And इसके अलावा नीति आयोग member said that the share of the private health insurance is also going up. So this shows a sign of maturity in terms of the insurance arena, as those who can afford, they will afford it from private players also. So that's the important thing. So India is going to host the SCO's defense ministers meeting this week. And with this, the member of SCO is there. That's important. So it includes Russia, India, Pakistan, China, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and New Delhi would be hosting it. So the defense ministers, they will discuss amongst other issues, matters concerning the regional peace and security, counterterrorism efforts within the SCO, and effective multilateralism. So these are the things which are going to be discussed, which are on the agenda. तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट का कहना ये है कि द टेस्ट इज कि हाउ फार कैन कोर्ट्स गो ऑन द सेम सेक्स यूनियन. सो अभी दिस इज सब्जुडाइज्ड. सो सुप्रीम कोर्ट का कहना यही है कि हाउ फार कैन द कोर्ट्स गो जब हम लीगलाइजेशन ऑफ सेम सेक्स मैरिजेस की बात करते हैं. सो इट्स सेड कि पावर्स ऑफ द पार्लियामेंट कवर ऑलमोस्ट ऑल द एरियाज रेज्ड इन द प्लीज ऑन द same sex marriage. So constitution bent to the Supreme Court hearing these petitions seeking the legal recognition of same sex marriages, questioned ki how far the court can adjudicate in issues in which parliament is also empowered to legislate. So how far can the courts go in such types of matters? So the bench said that the powers of the parliament, they cover almost all the areas raised in the petitions. So it cannot be disputed that Parliament has the power to interfere within the canvas covered by these petitions. And entry 5 of the concurrent list covers marriage and divorce. So marriage and divorce, they are part of the concurrent list. So the test really is how far can the courts go in such types of matters. So that's the thing. And there are different views mentioned of different advocates. So WHO, it flags the contaminated cough syrups which were made in India. So it said that contaminated cough syrup made by an Indian company, they had been found on the Marshall Islands and even in Micronesia. So from the geography perspective, these two areas, they become important. And Global Health Body said that it's in its medical product alert that a batch of the substandard syrups, TG syrup, it has been identified and reported to WHO on 6th of April. So that's the name of the syrup. It's an expectorant used to relieve the chest congestion and symptoms of the cough. So samples of the cough syrups from the Marshall Islands, they were analyzed by the Quality Control Laboratories of the Therapeutic Goods Administration of Australia. And analysis it was found that the product contained unacceptable amounts of diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol as contaminants. So these are two types of contaminants which have been found, and diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol, they are toxic to humans when consumed, and they can even prove to be fatal. Coming to the world page, so there's huge biological risk after Sudan fighters, they occupy the lab. So the World Health Organization said that fighters in the conflict ravaged Sudan, they have occupied the National Public Laboratory, which is holding samples of diseases including polio and measles, creating an extremely dangerous situation. So they have kicked out जो भी सारे technicians थे from the lab, which is completely under the control of one of the fighting parties as a military base. So it has been made as a military base also. So there is huge biological risk. So if it is released from that lab, so again we can see spike on a spike of cases of these types of diseases. Coming to the business page, so oil prices, El Nino, they are the key risk to inflation and growth outlook. So ये हम पहले भी डिस्कस कर चुके हैं स्पेसिफिकली अभी के टाइम में जो कंसर्न्स है रिगार्डिंग इन्फ्लेशन या तो वो क्रूड ऑयल प्राइसेस की वजह से इट कैन इंक्रीज इन द कमिंग टाइम्स एंड एल नीनो की वजह से फूड इन्फ्लेशन कैन गो अप. So जो downside risk है to the official 6.5% GDP growth projection for this fiscal, it dominates. And Ministry says in the monthly report, it flags milk, wheat, and crude oil prices as posing risk to the outlook on inflation. So these are the important reasons. Reasons pata hona should be like important from the perspective of this article. Moving to the Mint newspapers. So here, talking about the cryptocurrencies. So is crypto winter finally coming to a close or not? So almost like it's been 1 year key cryptocurrencies, they've not been rising. So that's what we are going to talk about here. So after almost a year of downturn, we are seeing crypto markets, they are again rising once again. So analysts, they are predicting sky high prices of cryptos, and Bitcoin, it is again the poster boy for the resurgence. So let's see what else is given. So predictions kya hai? Predictions yahi hai ki it would be increasing. Iski zyada detail mein jana is not important. So is this going to be a possible bull run or not? So जब हम शेयर मार्केट की बात करते हैं तो we talk about bull and bears or like मतलब bullish market या bearish market. So is it going to be a bull run? मतलब when we expect prices to go up, so that's called bullish, and when we expect it to go down, so that's bearish. So is it going to be a possible bull run or not? Because now we are expecting, and there are predictions for the skyrocketing of the cryptocurrency. So even some experts, they expect a bull run for the crypto once again. They do not expect it to be last forever. Obviously, that's not possible. It will be lasting forever. And crypto market has gone through multiple bull runs in the short history also, and they're always followed by a bear phase. So एक bull run होता है, उसके बाद bear phase आता है. So in phase wise manner, it increases. So continuously ऐसा नहीं होता कि continuous basis पे या तो increase होता रहता है या fall होता रहता है. So in a wave like pattern, either it's keep on in like increasing trend upwards ही रहता है. So no one expects volatility in the crypto markets to disappear magically. And even though the industry cites government regulations as the welcome moves, some may still hurt the industry and investors' ability to invest in the digital assets. So that's a small update. Then frauds, they will persist and we need effective control. So MCA Ministry of Corporate Affairs is saying that. एंड ऑब्वियसली जो फ्रॉड्स है वो होते रहेंगे, बट उनको कंट्रोल करने के लिए वी नीड टू हैव अ प्रॉपर मैकेनिज्म एंड इफेक्टिव मैकेनिज्म. सो द serious fraud investigation office, which increased its capacity, it completed 23 investigations during the year, up from 13 in the year before, and adding that government was committed to combating the frauds. So there was like investigation regarding the cases of alleged fraud committed by the Chinese commercial entities using the corporate structure for the app frauds involving loans, illegal gaming, and tokens. So such types of frauds, they are on a rise. So as the world economy flourishes and corporates thrive to bloom alongside it, fraud will continue to exist. So it's important for the corporations to implement effective controls and governance frameworks to prevent fraud and financial crimes within their organizations. And increased digitization of the economy has raised risk of the fraud as well. So Finance and Corporate Affairs Minister said that at an event that work is underway along with the RBI and the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology for a clampdown on such frauds like never before. So specifically, जो loan से related apps हैं, such types of cases and frauds because of them are on rise. So do not get into their trap. And the strong call from the ministry for the efficient internal control. So there needs to be strong and efficient internal controls also. So that highlights the fraud risk facing the businesses in general also. So that's the thing, and we'll have a look at what's going to be the new update at this front. Coming to Financial Express, so let's see what are the important things for us here today. So the coal stock at the power plants is 64% higher. And of the annual coal imports of 220 to 230 million ton, 100 million ton can be substituted by addressing an availability issue caused by the logistic constraints for evacuation of fuel. So we are having good amount of coal stock. So Supreme Court ruling on the IT searches, it's a big relief to the taxpayers. So courts call, Supreme Court upholds the High Court ruling that reopening the assessment needs incriminating material during a search and seizure operation. Any other material recovered from the search cannot be relied on for the reassessment orders, and ruling came in respect to the several appeals which were filed by the Revenue Department, which were dismissed by Supreme Court. So taxman can reopen the completed or even unabated assessment if any or other material proof indicate certain income escaped the assessment. So इस केस में फिर से assessment reopen की जा सकती है. So India's banking system, it is less prone to the SVB type of failure. So SVB Silicon Valley Bank जो fail हुआ था USA में, and ऐसे type की failures India में होना, it is very less likely. So risk weighs on the financial 2024's growth. सो ग्रोथ के ऊपर कुछ कंसर्न्स जरूर हो सकते हैं, एंड यहाँ पे डिफरेंट ग्रोथ के फोरकास्ट भी दे रखे हैं इंडिया के बाय डिफरेंट बॉडीज एंड इवन द क्रेडिट रेटिंग एजेंसी. सो द मिनिस्ट्रीज comments are somewhat at divergence with the RBI's latest State of the Economy report, which suggests that there could be a positive surprise to the IMF, which recently cut India's growth estimates for the current fiscal to 6.1%. So हमें थोड़ी बहुत divergence जरूर देखने को मिल रही है when we talk about the RBI stance and the government stance as far as the GDP growth is concerned. So we see that these are dominated upside because of the upside risk, given the hardening of the oil prices, troubles in the global financial sector, and subdued monsoon forecast. So it, however, reposed faith in the country's strong banking system and said that it's less prone to Silicon Valley Bank type failures. As Indian banks, they are well placed to handle any stress emanating from the current monetary tightening cycle. So the Indian banks, they are very, very less vulnerable to any types of failures. And reason हम already देख चुके हैं crude oil prices की वजह से, and then there are forecast of El Nino. So They can be the possible reasons in future, जिसकी वजह से we can see inflation going up. But for the time being, we are seeing that even the retail inflation and the wholesale inflation, they are below the 6% level. So states का जो capital expenditure है, it's on track and it is increased by 12% in April to Feb period. So even that would be helping in increasing the growth rate because it plays an important role when it comes to the rate of investment, because capital expenditure, obviously, it is important for capital formation. So generative artificial intelligence के जो पीछे concepts and ideas हैं वो हमारे लिए examination के लिए important है. तो यहाँ पे however that is not been talked about, but you can search about it. Generative artificial intelligence, very important topic. Now, talking about the difficult neighbors, our external affairs minister says that it's for us very difficult to engage with a neighbor who practices cross-border terrorism against us. We've always said that they have to deliver on the commitment not to encourage, sponsor, and carry out cross-border terrorism. So he's been talking about Pakistan. So again, it is talking about protecting the interest of the unorganized sector workers, the gig economy workers. So from proactively defining the gig and the platform workers to facilitate their inclusion in the policy decisions to the social security covered through various schemes, India has been taking concrete steps in interest of the unorganized sector workers. But यहाँ पे भी हमने code on social security की बात करी थी जो उसमें it is not guaranteeing them to the gig workers. It is just talking about कि कौन कौन eligible है. So gig workers, they are eligible, but ultimately we need to see कि जो benefits हैं, are they being delivered to the gig workers or not. So it is no guarantee of social security to them. So India, through its G20 presidency, aims to build a consensus on an international skill gap mapping portal for all the member countries. And even the International Labour Organization, in its report, it has highlighted the low social protection coverage among the online platform workers and pointed out that only 40% of such workers, they have health insurance, while only 20% they have access to old age protection schemes. So that's like their loan coverage, while few countries like Spain, Italy, Belgium, they have included provisions even in their legislature to include the platform workers within their social security net. Initiatives by other remain scarce, with a lot of still remaining to be achieved. So यहाँ पे कुछ countries का mention भी किया गया है when we're talking about the benefits to them. So इंडिया में अगर हम different schemes की बात करें तो we also have like प्रधानमंत्री Shram Yogi Mandhan Yojana. It was introduced as a contributory pension scheme to provide old age protection to the unorganized workers. Then there is voluntary insurance schemes like Aam Aadmi Bima Yojana and Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana. They were established to provide accident, death, and disability insurance coverage to the poor, especially in the unorganized sector. To different schemes, but a proper legislation hona bhi is important. And इसके अलावा प्रधानमंत्री गरीब कल्याण package, which was provided a host of relief measures to the poor people, thereby helping them sustain in during the pandemic times. So that's there. And then we also have the UN SDG goal 1.3, which calls for the implementation of nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all by 2030. So through the collective and the coordinated international efforts, the global skill gap crisis, it can be successfully elevated, and there would be sustainable financing of the social protection, ensuring well-being of all the workers, including the gig and the platform workers. Coming to the Indian Express, so here, see. So Fali S. Nariman, so who's been a senior advocate, he says that I have full confidence Supreme Court will never let the basic structure to be watered down. So since the Kesavanand Bharati judgment completes 50 years, so this topic is definitely very, very important and it's been in news. We have traced all the important evolution and then the subsequent judgments which involve the basic structure doctrine. So that topic is like very important. You can go through those videos. Moving forward and coming directly to the editorial section. So the Bar Council, it appears to be echoing the government's line on gay marriage. This is a symptom of polarization. So the author is Indira Jaising. So April 24, it is marked the 50th anniversary of Kesavanand Bharati judgment, and it was indeed ironic to read the Bar Council of India's resolution questioning the Supreme Court's legitimacy to decide a batch of petitions which are seeking equal rights and liberties for the non-heterosexual couples. So BCI's resolution employs a near identical phrase to the one that the Union Law Minister recently used to question the Supreme Court's power of judicial review in the context of the collegium system that is intended to ensure a fair and independent judiciary free from the political interference. So the Union Law Minister and now the Bar Council of India, they assert that the will of the people predominantly resides with the parliament and not with the unelected judges. But does that parliament actually represents the will of the people or not is the main question. So there's a profound change reflected even in Bar Council of India's resolution. So she's been like talking about that it's a symptom of polarization, which is one of the symptoms of that. So that the legal profession it has undergone in recent years. So the polarization that we see in Indian society as a result of the ruling party's Hindutva agenda reflects itself in the legal profession also. So organization of lawyers ki baat kare, which are often supported by and they are given patronage by the ruling party and sometimes by a few judges themselves. They push their right-wing agenda through an abuse of court systems such as filing of the politically motivated petitions. So basically, she's saying key symptoms of polarization, they are even visible in the Indian judicial system. So self-reliance is the key. So concerted efforts, they are needed to address unemployment and inequality. So for a time when even stepped out of from a time when even stepping out of the home as a young woman would prompt unsolicited comments about the mortality to now when women they are at the helm in various sectors, we have come a long way definitely. But every parent, irrespective of the social and economic background, wants their daughter to be educated now. So that is no small feat. And the path it has been laid for us, the next 25 years, they are about the walk ahead. So here she has been talking about that self-reliance is very important, addressing the challenges of unemployment and inequality, even that's important. And when we talk about inequality, the Oxfam report that becomes important, the data that it provides us, the scale and the intensity of inequality that's prevalent in India. So that's there. And so for like addressing these challenges, we need sensitization campaigns in all the corners of the country and civil society initiatives, they can be a viable solution here. So state and non-state actors, they could encourage women's empowerment and anti-caste ideals in both rural and urban areas. Secondly, we must address the unemployment crisis where despite the progress we have made socially, India's economy is still struggling today. So unemployment remains a central challenge and the state must focus on generating jobs for the youth if we are to realize our potential. Lastly, we have to overcome even the social hurdles. So caste and gender-based discrimination, they are the challenges that each of us has to face up to individually and refuse to tolerate or endorse those kinds of differences. So together we must strive for a casteless society and one where women they are free. So this is the image of India I have at 100 when we complete 100 years of independence. So India and the SEO paradox. So let's see what is the SEO paradox. And even as the Eurasian Forum looks attractive to a growing number of regional states, its internal contradictions, they are casting a shadow over its strategic coherence. So paradox यही है कि एक side ये दिख रहा है कि जो regional states है, when we talk about the SEO, they are like kind of like posing a positive picture कि more and more countries specifically in this region they are coming together, but at the same time कुछ countries कुछ members ऐसे हैं जिनके बीच में internal contradictions भी हैं. So on the outer side it looks कि it poses a kind of a positive picture, but internally there are certain internal contradictions which are casting a shadow over its strategic coherence. So Delhi's engagement with the SEO all these decades was premised on the Russian primacy in the region and Moscow's support of the India's regional interest. So for India, a strong and independent Russia, that's critical for maintaining the inner Asian balance, but Delhi it's in no position to ensure the Moscow's strategic autonomy from Beijing that depends on the Russian strategic choices. So Delhi's burden in SEO must now be to protect its own interest amidst a rapidly changing regional power distribution in China's favor. So Russia and China, their closeness and their coordination, cooperation that's increasing and strengthening with time, and specifically after the war in Ukraine, we are seeing key how things they have been they are still getting reordered when we talk about the like global level. So we've already talked about Operation Kaveri. We'll be bringing out all the Indians from Sudan. So we're seeing that the protest by wrestlers, it has again been renewed and they're still protesting. So why Supreme Court it has stepped in this issue? So we have like already had a look at what are the complaints against the president of the Wrestling Federation of India. And the protesters, what do they want? So wrestlers, they're demanding कि एक FIR register होनी चाहिए against that alleged person, Brij Bhushan, who's the president of Wrestling Federation of India, and that he should be arrested under the POCSO Act, that is Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. So they have also demanded that he be removed as the president of the Wrestling Federation of India and that the federation should be dissolved. So they have said they will continue to protest until their demands they are met. But question यही है कि अगर जो allegations level किए गए हैं against the president of WFI, they are decade old and अब ये क्यों surface हुए हैं? So एक ये potential question है. So January में a member of protesting group told in Express कि Vinesh had received calls from a number of young women wrestlers about the unsafe environment at the national camp in Lucknow. So after those calls, Vinesh, Sakshi and Bajrang, they decided that Brij Bhushan and the coaches involved in the sexual harassment over the years, they have to be called out. So obviously, एक incidents की वजह से they're not sitting there. There's a repetition, and even the young wrestlers, they are facing such types of challenges and problems. So the things like they are subsidized, and so even Supreme Court is intervening because it is saying that the allegation of sexual harassment that's very serious, so it needs to be taken up seriously. So talking about the quantum computers in India, so we've already like talked about the quantum mission and what are quantum computers special. So already इस पे question आ चुका है in 2022 prelims, and what does a new mission to develop them mean for science in India? So we'll be like not going to much details. यहाँ पे qubit important हो जाता है and जो India में mission है that's important. So you can go through this part. And इसके अलावा zero shadow day हमने बात करा when the sun is exactly overhead, तो उस दिन आपको कोई shadows नहीं दिखती. You can see people they are standing and कोई भी shadow cast नहीं की जा रही है except जो मतलब exactly below their hands. I guess this is a shadow only. If not a shadow, okay. मतलब exactly when the sun is overhead, there is zero shadows. So Bengaluru, it saw a zero shadow day on Tuesday, and the event it is witnessed in places between the two tropics. So it is only between the two tropics, that is Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, that we observe this zero shadow day, and zero shadows are there. So जो places north of Ranchi हैं in India, they are ruled out of this thing. And apart from this, so what causes a zero shadow day? So Uttarayan, that is movement of the sun from south to north, from winter solstice to summer solstice, and then Dakshinyan, which is back from north to south. It happened because of Earth's rotation, and Earth's like tilted on its axis at an angle of roughly 23.5 degrees Celsius to the axis of revolution around the sun. So जो sun की location है, it moves from 23 degree north to 23 degrees south of the Earth's equator back. So all places whose latitudes they equal the angle between the sun's location and the equator on that day experience a zero shadow day with a shadow beneath an object at local noon. So you can see कि यहाँ पे the children, the people, they're holding their hands. So बस वो shadow यहाँ पे visible है. So India's first water metro. So it's green, clean boats to feed the Kochi's metro rail. So it's like you can see in this picture, they've been designed like metro rail coaches only. Boat को भी metro rail coach की तरह design किया गया. So this is India's first water metro, and this has been like inaugurated and launched by Prime Minister to the nation. And it's the Kochi Water Metro, first of its kind commuter service that's part of the city's integrated public transport system. They are like clean and green as well. And so that's the update. There's like nothing much important from this topic. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And there'll be a PDF link that has been shared with you guys, which is available in the description box. So you can go through the PDF once, and that's all. Do subscribe to our channel and hit the like button for this video.